John, for you, the crew dynamic, is there some characters that you've seen become a surprise to you, someone along the way?
Well, I think that's a fun part of this kind of storytelling. I think, you start with characters, there's so many of them that it takes a while. And I think that's what's great about the second season. I think you really start to lean into every character and know a little bit more about them. And there's some big surprises this year on some of the characters. So that was fun. And the storytelling part of it for me is the best thing. Brandon brought me on because we worked on 24 together, and he said, I've got this comedy. And I'm like, I'm the king of torture. You sure you're getting the right guy here? And he said no, because the drama is really where we want to be, and I've had so much fun. First of all, learning a lot about comedy from Seth, great teacher, and just leaning into that drama. They're just writing great scripts, and that's the key for me.
Yeah. And did you guys do you go back to Star Trek or anything like that, or do you just kind of what's soaked in is what you take away from it, or do you actually go back and try to look at episodes and things like that?
Obviously, this format is. I mean, the interesting thing about Star Trek is this format existed. I mean, you look at serials from the 1930s, and this format. Star Trek was really the first franchise to bring it to a point that reached the mainstream in such a massive way that it's just it really, in many ways, does have ownership of this idea of a captain on the bridge of a spaceship instead of a sailing ship. Yeah. But it's become kind of the convention, and so we did. You can't help but go there if you're doing this kind of show. We do try to, look. I mean, Family Guy is a good analogy. At the beginning, of course, Family Guy was influenced by The Simpsons. Every animated show in prime time since the late '80s has been influenced by that show heavily, because they did it. They figured out. They cracked the code. They did it right. And so you just try to, start by learning from what your predecessors have figured out, and then take it off in its own direction. And so, at a certain point, that's kind of what's happened with this show. So we try and let it kind of tell us where it wants to go.
And kind of calibrate from there. As far as the production design, what about as far as science fiction on television these days? We've seen so many spaceships. It's not as novel as it was even with The Next Generation. What's sort of the philosophy compared to where it's been science fiction?
There's such a history of all of this stuff that, it's just, I'm kind of the architect for his vision. And I think we've worked very closely together. And yes, you're inspired in any art form by everything that's come before. But I think ours is unique. It's unique to the show, and it's unique to Seth's vision.
That's great. And then just we're going to wrap up here, but looking forward, what would you do? You see the show getting darker before it gets brighter, or do you going to whatever that means?
We view this in, initially we were criticized for tone and inconsistency of tone. And my answer to that is, life does not have one tone. One day you have a birthday party and you're laughing and you get your friends over and it's a great day, and the next day maybe there's a tragedy in the family, and those are two very different days, but they're both part of the same life. And so this show does try to treat itself in that fashion. There are stories that necessitate a darker tone, and there are stories that necessitate a lighter tone. And I think as long as the characters are true to who they are, both can coexist and should coexist with this kind of show.